In the quiet of my study, the fire burns low. Outside, rain slides down the windows like thawing snow on glass. The air smells faintly of salt. On the desk before me lies an old ledger, its edges warped by time and sea. The title inked across the cover has nearly vanished, but I can still make out the name whispered between the stains, Qalupalik. The town of Nuvik sits on the edge of the Alaskan coast, a place where wind strips the paint from houses and sea fog moves through the streets like a living thing. People here learn early to respect the ocean. They keep their windows sealed against its cold breath and tell their children not to wander far when the tide begins to rise. But warnings lose their weight when spoken too often. Fear dulls into routine, and the sea, patient as ever, waits for curiosity. It was late winter when a boy vanished. His name was Noah Evenson, 14 years old, restless, clever, and too brave for a place that measures danger by temperature. He left home one evening, his boots new, his coat too thin, and did not return. They searched the shoreline for 3 days. Volunteers dragged the shallows with ropes and poles, breaking through crusted ice that shifted underfoot. Helicopters swept the coast with light. They found only a torn glove, frozen stiff and half-buried near the rocks. The town began to move more slowly after that. Windows closed earlier, snowmobiles passed quietly. Even laughter grew soft, as if sound itself might wake something better left sleeping. In a house near the bay lived a girl named Maya Anakatuk. She was 14, the same age as Noah. Her mother worked long hours at the clinic, and her grandmother, Tak, kept the old stories folded inside her like secrets. Maya had grown up hearing of the Qalupalik, though she never believed in her. It was an old superstition, a creature invented to keep children close to shore. At least, that was what she told herself. Yet when the ice began to groan at night and the tide pressed higher against the rocks, she found herself listening. There is a sound the water makes when it is waiting. The elders say it is the heartbeat of the deep, others say it is breathing. Maya would wake in the small hours to that rhythm. She would sit by the window and watch the bay shimmer with trapped light, the thin ice glowing faintly green from below. It was beautiful and wrong at once, as if something beneath was moving too slowly to be seen. That was how it began, not with a scream or a storm, but with a sound that was almost music. There are places where grief lingers long after the mourners have gone home. It seeps into the boards of empty houses and curls beneath the snow. The people of Nuvik carried their sorrow quietly, each pretending not to see the dark line spreading through the town's heart. They spoke of safety, of curfews, of patience, but what they feared most could not be fenced or reasoned with. I have read accounts of the Qalupalik from every corner of the north. Some describe her as scaled and green, others as pale and human except for the hands, too long, too thin, always reaching. All agree on one thing. She waits beneath the ice for those who wander too close to the water, and when she takes them, she does not simply drown them, she keeps them. Forever, the living forget, the dead remember. The Qalupalik remembers most of all. The wind fell away that week, and with the calm came a thin skin of ice that drifted across the bay like old glass. It cracked in long, quiet lines. The water below pushed against it with patient strength. The town moved more carefully. Vehicles idled longer before setting out. The school announced a shoreline restriction. The fishermen nodded and said the season would change soon. They said this many times. The season did not listen. At night, the bay hummed. The sound was low and steady, as if a bow drew across a string beneath the ice. The pitch shifted with the tide, deeper as the water rose, higher as it fell. The elders said it was ice singing. The younger ones said it was a trick of the wind reflecting off the tanks on the hill. The clinic logged new cases of headaches and unease. The mayor asked the Coast Guard to perform another sweep. The helicopters returned, traced slow circles, and left behind the smell of fuel. Maya listened from her window and counted the beats between each swell of sound. The rhythm comforted her at first, then unsettled her when she noticed the pattern changing. The music began to rise when the hour grew late, then fell away, as if someone beneath the ice had realized it was being watched. There is a kind of attention the sea does not like. The sea recognizes curiosity as a form of hunger. The sea responds in kind. Maya came from two lines that rarely agreed with one another. Her father had worked the trawlers before the storms took him. He left behind a silver coin on a leather cord burnished by his thumb and a box of photographs where the horizon always tilted. Her mother kept the clinic running and spoke in lists and plans. Her grandmother, Tak, carried stories inside her bones and sorted them cautiously, as if one wrong tale at the wrong moment could crack the house. Maya hid the coin under her shirt. When she pressed it to her lips, it tasted of salt. She told herself the taste came from her memory and not the metal. She told herself many things. She told herself she was not like the children in the stories who went looking for songs in the wrong places. She told herself she kept to the path when she walked home after school. She told herself she would never test the ice. Inheritance is not always blood. Sometimes it is attention sharpened by loss. Sometimes it is the way a silence in a room becomes the loudest thing in the world. Maya had learned to listen for the sound of missing footsteps on the porch. She had learned to count the hours between meals at the clinic because the phone never stopped. She had learned to smile when the teachers said the word resilient. She did not feel resilient. She felt like a screen door in high wind. The bay knew that feeling. It had torn away stronger doors. It had infinite time. The records of Nuvik are neat. The clerk keeps the minutes in careful cursive. The crime reports are short. The weather log is exact. The archives remember the flood of 78, the fires of 93, the harsh winter that broke the docks in two. They do not remember the drownings that never returned to shore. Those live in kitchens and on porches and in the soft warnings mothers carry in their voices when the light shifts color near the water. There was once a teacher who told a visitor that stories of the Qalupalik were cruel. He said the tale preyed upon the fear of mothers and the disobedience of children. He said old people enjoyed control. He wrote this in a letter that no longer exists. He left the town the next spring. He did not convince anyone who mattered. The bay offers reminders when words fail. The year before Noah disappeared, a girl slipped through a fracture while skating outside the flag markers. Her cousins pulled her out before the current took her. She came back shivering and blue, and for months after, she woke at night and said that the water wanted the light in her eyes. She grew quiet. She began to sleep with her curtains open to watch the tide. Her grandmother moved her bed away from the window. The girl slept on the floor to be closer to the crack under the sill that let in the sea smell. The family moved inland by a mile. The girl slept better, not well, just better. The town called it a near tragedy. The elders called it a warning. Warnings become routine. Routine becomes permission. Permission becomes invitation. The sound changed in the last week of March. The low hum lifted into a thin melody that rode the edges of the flows. It slipped into alleys and along the backs of houses. It found porch steps and basements, and the places where children hid when they did not wish to be found. The tune had no words, yet it felt familiar, as if it had been heard in a dream and forgotten on waking. It carried the cadence of rocking. It held the patience of snow falling into open water. Parents slept lightly and did not know why. Dogs stood stiff at fences and watched the shore with eyes that showed more white than usual. A fishing crew swore that the buoys moved of their own will, then swore they had been mistaken. Mistakes are easier to hold than fear. Maya felt the song before she heard it. It arrived in the body first, a slow sway that set her breath to a new count. Her heartbeat tried to match it. Her chest tightened when she resisted. She sat on the floor and pressed her palms flat against the boards until the tune receded. Then she stood, curious despite herself, and looked toward the window. The ice held a color she had never seen. It was not green and not blue. It was the shade of light that sinks with a diver and does not return. It pulsed softly, a faint answer to the rhythm above it. The tide was rising. The moon hung low and bone-pale over the black line of mountains. The town slept unevenly. The bay did not sleep at all. The lullaby slid under doors. It vibrated the picture frames. It made glasses sing. It carried the names of the missing without speaking them. Maya felt the tune touch her name at the back of her throat. She swallowed. The taste of salt grew stronger. Maya's mother counted in order to stay calm. She counted medication trays, stitches, and the number of minutes a patient could stay in the waiting room. She counted the hours between calls from the Evanson house and the number of casseroles arriving in aluminum pans with foil lids that creased like maps. She counted the steps from the clinic to the truck, and from the truck to the kitchen, and from the kitchen to the door of Maya's room, where she would pause and listen, as if numbers might give shape to fear. She did not count the stories her own mother had told. She did not count the photographs of the bay lining the hallway that showed the horizon level and unbroken. She did not count the nights she woke to the sound of a lullaby with no words. She told herself it was wind moving through the vents. She told herself that her daughter slept well. She told herself that the ocean was simply water. There are forms of sorrow that prefer the language of measurement. They make lists and stack boxes and clear counters. They do not look at the window for long. They close blinds. They rearrange the medicine cabinet. They call this control. It is a kind of prayer, made with hands instead of voice. The lullaby continued. The numbers failed to answer it. I have watched towns choose the story that hurts least. They pick the version that leaves the furniture unmoved. They repeat it until it becomes a shield. The shield holds until it does not. Then the older truth returns and takes the shape of a mother at a window or a child at a shoreline. The old truth does not apologize. The old truth does not negotiate. There are many descriptions of the Qalupalik. Some say her skin gleams like kelp in a tide pool. Some say her hair moves on its own in the current. Some say her hands are long enough to reach through cracks that no human wrist could pass. All agree that she wears a kind of carrier across her back, a skin bag or a woven pouch, and that the bag never empties. This is the part of the story that makes the breath stop. She does not merely take, she keeps. I have wondered whether the bag is a kindness or a cruelty. I have wondered whether the Qalupalik believes she is saving the taken from a greater harm. I do not know. I only know that monsters often begin as guardians who forgot to let go. The first sighting came from a snowplow driver who told no one for 2 days. He had seen a shape at the edge of the ice where the tide cut a black lane along the rocks. The shape moved with the calm certainty of ownership. It lifted from the water and settled again as if tasting the air. He said nothing because he had a son and a daughter and a wife who did not sleep well, and because the mind protects itself with silence when the world tilts. By the time he spoke, the shore had already given the town another sign. At dawn, a braided cord washed onto the stones. It was made of something that resembled seal hide, and something that did not. It was too smooth, too warm, too intact. The knots were of a kind the elders recognized, but could not tie without instruction. The cord smelled faintly of sweetgrass and brine. The children who found it insisted that it hummed when held to the ear. The adults insisted it did not. They wrapped it in a towel and brought it to the school. The custodian locked it in a supply closet. Maya learned about the cord at lunch and walked the long way home to pass the shoreline. The ice flexed and released. The tide pressed a thin tongue of water farther under the crust. The lullaby had softened with daylight, yet persisted in the bones. Maya felt it move along her teeth like a current. She pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth until the sensation faded. She did not stop walking. Near the boat launch, she saw a depression in the snow that did not match any footprint. It looked like a basket had rested there, heavy enough to leave a rim. In the center lay a single strand of hair. It shone the same strange shade as the ice light at night, not green and not blue. Maya leaned close and felt her breath lift in her chest, as if the air had grown thin. She did not touch the hair. She wanted to. She did not. Restraint is a small triumph. It rarely feels like victory. The northern lights returned with unusual strength that evening. They spilled over the mountains and unrolled across the bay in slow folds. People stepped onto porches and into driveways and watched the sky become a river of color. Phones came out. Jackets were shrugged tighter. For a few minutes, the town forgot the sound beneath the ice. For a few minutes, it remembered that beauty can be violent and still be called beautiful. The aurora drifted and then deepened. The color shifted into the same half-green that Maya had seen in the ice. The water answered with a shimmer that did not belong to reflection. A seam opened a dozen yards from the boat launch. It was narrow and long. It widened on the seventh count. The ice around it cleared to glass. The lullaby rose as if pleased. Maya watched from the hill by the clinic. She felt the coin at her throat grow cold. The air smelled like wet stone. The aurora brightened across the open seam, then dimmed as if a hand had passed between sky and water. The tide lifted the edges of the fracture in small breaths. Something moved below the glass. The motion was deliberate and slow. It gave the impression of arms. The town said later that the ice had cracked because of a pressure ridge. Photographs were posted to prove it. The photographs showed a seam and a wash of green light and the shadow of a shape that could have been anything. They did not show the way the lullaby changed at the center of the seam, as if addressing one listener in particular. Photographs fail at that scale. The living do not. Maya turned to walk home. The coin tapped once against her sternum. The lullaby softened to a private murmur. The aurora thinned and paled. The seam closed on the eighth breath. The town exhaled and told itself that winter was preparing to leave. The sea made no such promise. In the morning, the school custodian unlocked the supply closet to find the towel empty. The braided cord was gone. The towel was damp and smelled of salt. The floor beneath the shelf was wet and then dry in a circle, as if a wet hand had pressed down and lifted away. The custodian closed the door and stood in the hallway until the bell rang. He told the principal. The principal said nothing could disappear from a locked room. The custodian agreed. They both went back to work. At noon, a fisherman found a boot in the slush at the edge of the marina. The leather matched the brand sold at the hardware store. The size matched the foot of a boy named Noah. The laces had been retied in a knot the elders used when securing a child in a carrier on a long journey. The fisherman brought the boot to the sheriff. The sheriff called the mother. The mother did not speak. The town gathered itself around her like a coat. Maya walked home with the image of the knot lodged behind her eyes. She tugged at the coin and thought of the basket-shaped impression in the snow. She cut down the alley by the cannery and stopped at the back fence where the wind came straight off the water. A drift had piled there, soft and clean. On top of the drift lay a single strip of hide, thin as a ribbon and the colour of kelp. It glistened without melting the snow beneath it. Maya slipped it into her pocket and felt the chill run up her arm like water poured along skin. She closed her fist until the feeling faded. The strip did not hum. It did something worse. It waited. There are objects that behave like memories. They carry more weight than their size allows. They do not push back when you pick them up. They change the pitch of a room. They are often described as cursed. I prefer the word committed. Such objects belong to a story that will continue with or without your consent. To touch them is to accept an invitation you cannot later deny. The strip of hide carried a promise. It was a thread that led back to a hand. The hand was long. The fingers could close through water as if grasping air. The basket was not empty. The lullaby was patient because patience had always worked before. It would work again. Maya believed she could resist. Belief is a fine warmth. It burns fast in the wrong wind. When a story decides to finish what it began, it rarely asks permission. The sea had waited long enough. The following night, the temperature rose by 3 degrees. The ice groaned beneath its own thaw. The wind fell still, leaving a silence so complete that every breath sounded loud enough to wake the bay. The tide crept farther inland than it should have, licking the stones at the base of the seawall. The lamps along the harbour flickered in rhythm with the pull of the current. In her room, Maya dreamed of the sound that had haunted her for weeks. In the dream, she stood barefoot on the frozen shore, her reflection rippling beneath the glass surface. The lullaby came not from the air, but from within her own chest, vibrating through her ribs. The song was neither good nor evil, it was simply certain. When she woke, the coin her father had left her lay on the pillow beside her cheek. Frost ringed its edge. She sat up slowly and saw that her window was open. The curtain moved like breath. The strip of hide she had hidden inside her jacket was gone. Outside, the moon was full and bright enough to lay a silver path across the water. It led from her backyard to the bay like a line drawn for her alone. She put on her boots, pulled on her coat, and stepped out. There are moments when a life divides itself without sound. One half remains in the house, tucked inside the walls, forever 16, forever wondering. The other follows the song. Maya walked toward the sea. The snow did not crunch beneath her. It gave way soundlessly, as if the earth itself did not wish to alert anyone. Her breath rose in small clouds. The tide was near its height. She could see the edge of the frozen water, black and gleaming. The Qalupalik was waiting. She rose from the surface like a shadow, remembering its shape. Her hair drifted in slow waves, though there was no wind. Her skin gleamed faintly, as if lit from within by the same green light that haunted the ice. The long arms reached toward the shore, not fast, not urgent, but inevitable. The lullaby deepened. It was the sound of heartbeats reversing, of water folding over air. It was a mother's hum turned inside out. The watchers from the hills might have seen a girl standing on the shore, her coat open, her breath steady. They might have thought she was dreaming. They might have been right. Maya took a single step forward, and the ice accepted her without resistance. The first sensation was not cold, but pressure. The water closed over her like a living cloak. Sound faded to vibration, then to pulse. The light above bent, stretched, and vanished. She opened her eyes and found herself surrounded by soft motion. Shapes moved in the dark. The Qalupalik's form passed in and out of visibility, never entirely distinct. Sometimes she seemed a woman with long limbs and hair that drifted like kelp. Sometimes she seemed made of the same material as the water, her body only a suggestion of boundaries. Her eyes were the color of deep glass, ancient and indifferent. Maya reached for the coin at her neck, but the chain had snapped. It sank beside her in a slow spiral. The Qalupalik caught it before it touched the bottom. She examined it briefly, then pressed it into the folds of the basket she carried on her back. The basket was vast, far larger than it appeared above the surface, a hollow woven of darkness and light. Inside it something stirred, many small somethings, shifting and whispering like reeds in a current. Maya understood then that the stories were wrong. The Qalupalik did not eat the taken. She kept them in her arms as one might keep treasured things, singing them quietly forever. The song returned, not through her ears but through her blood. It asked her name without words. It offered peace without warmth. It promised belonging without return. For a moment Maya felt the pull of it. She thought of her father's photographs, of her mother's tired hands, of her grandmother's silence. She thought of the boy in the red parka. She thought of all the stories told to keep children safe. She thought of the ones who had not listened, and how they had not all been children. The sea held her still. The Qalupalik's face hovered inches away, beautiful and terrible in its gentleness. The creature tilted her head, as if listening for something distant. Then, slowly, she placed her long hand against Maya's heart. The water burned cold. Above them, the ice cracked. What happens next depends on who tells it. Some say the Qalupalik took Maya, as she had taken others before. They say her mother found only the footprints leading to the shore and the open window framing a half-moon. They say the bay sang louder that night than it had in generations. Others say that the girl resisted, that the coin's silver carried her father's final wish, and when it touched the sea floor, it broke the lullaby's spell. They say she rose through the water like a spark through smoke, gasping as she reached the surface, found the seam in the ice, and dragged herself back to the snow. But I know the sea, and I know its bargains. Sometimes it takes the body and leaves the name. Sometimes it takes the memory and leaves the shell. Sometimes it allows both to walk home so that no one believes. Weeks later, when the thaw came, fishermen reported a new pattern carved into the underside of the ice, delicate, symmetrical, like a net of veins. It glowed faintly in the dark, the same color as the aurora. Scientists said it was a mineral bloom. The elders said it was a mark of debt. Maya's grandmother stopped telling stories. Her mother kept the window closed. And every spring, when the melt begins and the bay loosens its hold, someone hears a voice under the thawing ice, singing a lullaby without words. It sounds like memory. It sounds like the sea is learning to speak again. There is a sorrow older than language. It hides in lullabies and warnings, and the space between a mother's heartbeat and her child's breath. The Qalupalik is not only a creature but a promise of consequence. She remembers every face that leaned too near the tide. I do not call her evil. Evil is a human invention. She is the sea's memory given form, the guardian who forgot that mercy has limits. I have turned the page in my ledger. The ink bleeds faintly as if wet with salt. The word remains the same, Qalupalik. In another century, in another town, someone will walk too close to the edge and hear that same soft song rising from below. When they do, I will be watching. I always am.